In this follow-up tutorial for the stapler, I'm actually going to remodel this, but using a different set of sort of approaches to it. So my goal here was to show you how we could model this using some slightly different modeling techniques, tools, and approaches to achieve essentially the same thing we had done in the first tutorial. So let's go ahead and do something similar we had done before. I'm going to hide the middle parts. In fact, I'm not even going to try and use this bottom profile. And we'll come into the front view. Let's go ahead and hide the base altogether right now. Shift A, and we're going to add plane, much like we had done before, of 1 centimeter. And we're going to align it to view. Command A so we can apply scale and rotation. So I'm going to move through this initial point pretty quickly because it's very similar to what we had done before. Tab G, X. So I'm just going to do the basic forming work here. So E key, X, about like that. Press Shift R a couple of times. And in fact, I am going to pull back the base so we can kind of see it in reference to that. So right up into that point, we are going to then come up here. And in fact, I'm going to use, sometimes I just like the widget. I like seeing that widget, even though I can obviously just press the G key, but there's something about that that I do kind of like. Okay, so we get that in place, 2 key, and then E, and we're going to pull down to about there, R key, S, and we'll just rotate that, sort of move it, E key, R, S, E key, R, S, E key, R, S. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm just sort of doing the basic forming work. And then one final one down like that. Okay, so let's do this. Now I'm going to turn the base back off. And let's apply a subdivision modifier to that, and we're going to increase the resolution. Let's again come into on cage mode, and then we go over to tweak. So this is largely similar to what we had done before in vertex mode. So we can just click, hold, and drag and pull these points up so that we can get this aligned pretty closely. Okay, that's close enough. Let's go ahead and turn the base back on because we're going to use that as a reference now. Now, in the first version, I approached this part quite differently. We've got this angle on the back part of this object that we're wanting to reference and get this object that we've just modeled to conform to. Let's press the Tab key to leave edit mode. Let's come over to the 3D cursor tool. Press the N key and look at the tools. We want the 3D cursor to align to the geometry. Go to orientation and then geometry, and then click on this interior surface like that. Press Shift and A, and we're going to create a plane there. Let's make it, say, 3 centimeters, and we want it to align to the 3D cursor, which is aligned to that click point on the surface. Let's go ahead and pull back. We want to switch over from global to local so that we make sure and maintain this local orientation. S key, and then we're going to do S and X so it scales along the local axis. So we've gotten that there, and we've created this plane that we can now use to get this geometry as a reference to or applied to. So let's come over to the object that we want to project. Let's turn off subdivision temporarily, and we need to come up to the modifier stack. Let's go ahead under deform and add a shrink wrap to it. Let's move it up to the top, and we need to tell it what to project onto. So that's where we would pick the plane, and boom, you can see it projects up onto there. But by default, it's projected it in a normal direction to that surface. But we want it to go only along the Y direction. So we come over here and we have it project and just make sure it's Y. And then we also want to make sure it goes in both the positive and the negative direction. And that maintains from the left the actual profile. but it is now projected onto that flat surface. So let's go ahead and apply this. And let's go ahead and turn this off since we don't need that anymore. So when we look at this, it's gotten itself conformed, but this part up front needs to be formed a little bit more. So let's come into face mode and let's take these parts. In fact, I'm going to only take these. I want to make sure that I am in global orientation so we can pull these away just in a crude way. 2 key goes into edge mode, and I'm going to pull this just a little forward. So now we come up to the front and we need to make sure, so my eye is always looking at that origin point so I know where that is. Let's press Shift and S and also take cursor to world origin. Anytime I'm about to do symmetry operations like that, I kind of always like to know where my cursor is in the origin. E key, press the Y key, and then S, Y, 0, come up to item, and it's along the y-axis. We can press 0 and it moves it right there. That 0 again is relative to the object's origin point. Let's go ahead and add symmetry. So we come over to generate mirror along just the y-axis. I've got this edge selected. So if we look at this in the top, I want to move that forward. In fact, I think this here, I want to pull that back just a little bit, just to round that. But I'd really like to see it with the subdivision applied. Press the backslash key to isolate this, and let's move the symmetry up top, and then turn subdivision back on. So we can come over here, let's take these 2 edges, and we can kind of move those out. And this is where you can just start doing the contouring. And I think here I want that to be about like that. And just look at it and see if there's any more contouring work that you want to do. So for instance, I think on these vertices here, I want to pull those out. Yeah, and I like this. I think that works pretty well. And that, yeah, I think that works pretty well. Let's go ahead and take a look at this just in the front view. And I just want to see if there's any more minor topology refining that I want to do. Let's come into select box here. And I think maybe these points could come up just slightly. Very, very minor thing. So we want to put a loop cut around the perimeter at the top to help with curving. And we also want to cap the top off. So let's go ahead and cap the top off first. And the way that we want to do that is by bridging both edges. But right now we have symmetry applied. So our mirror. So let's go ahead and leave edit mode, and we will apply that so we can actually gain access to both sides of the geometry. In fact, let's disable subdivision temporarily. So press the 2 key, double click along this top perimeter, hold the Shift key to deselect those 2 points. Bring up the context menu and then do bridge edge loops. Let's go ahead and put the number of cuts at 1. And so do you see how it's trying to interpolate those? We want to come to where it says interpolation here, and we want to change that to linear. Okay, so let's actually double click this. We do want to move it up, but I didn't want to let the interpolation system try and do it. Let's switch over here to shrink and fatten. We can look at this in the front view, and when I move this, it moves each edge up along its own normal direction. So we just get a little bit of rounding at the top. But then we need to cap this top area off. So let's do this. Let's come over and turn subdivision back on so that we can kind of see the effect here. Let's switch over into vertex mode. And what I want to do is let's come into the front. Let's just press G and move it right about there. Press this point and do merge vertices at last. So when we merge those, then that area comes together like that. So I mentioned that we want to put a loop around here to constrain the geometry. So let's do this. Let's turn off subdivision temporarily, press Command R, and we'll put that right about there. And then when we turn this back on, you can kind of see that. I like to see what I'm doing with the native geometry. It's totally how you want to work with it. So let's see. Let's take a look at that. That's coming together, but now we want to focus down on this area. you can see that it's kind of rounded down here, and we need to constrain that so that this is all controlled a little bit better, and we need to cap off this area. So let's turn off subdivision, come into edge mode and double click, bring up the context menu, and then do offset edge slide, and we'll just pull a new edge right there. Then let's take these two and these two edges and then do that bridge edge loops. We want number of cuts to be 1. There we go. And then here, take this edge, press the G key to move it, then B, and we will snap that into place. Switch over into vertex mode and then go into X-ray so that we can marquee. It's important to go into X-ray mode so it gets both those overlapped points. And then we will merge vertices by distance. And it tells me it's merged one vertex. Now when we turn subdivision back on, and if we look at this here in shaded, in fact, let's turn on smooth shading. It's a little bit ill-defined down here. I'd like this to be a little bit tighter. So let's once again turn off subdivision. I want to put a partial loop here and a partial loop here, but when you use the loop tool, it goes all the way around. And I don't want that to happen. So let's come into face mode, and I want to select these and these. I only want the loop to go up to this boundary. Press Command I, and then the H key to temporarily hide all of that geometry. So now when I come over, I can click and return, click, and we get a loop on just the geometry that we have visible. Press Option H to bring everything back. And now, when we slide these over, I want these edges to be exactly parallel to these existing edges. So let's do something very cool, kind of a hidden trick here. If I press the G key and then G again, it will slide. Well, that's pretty close, right? For all intents and purposes, but I really want it to be perfect. And you can see as I slide it over, the closer you get, it gets closer to those edges. But if you press the E key, it changes it so it becomes exactly parallel to the side that you're closest to. So it's exactly parallel here, regardless of how far I move it out. But I want to flip it because I want it to be on the other side. So press the F key, and now as I move it over, it's exactly parallel to those edges. Now come down here, hover over this entry, and copy that value. So we can do the same thing over here. GG to slide, E key takes us into this parallel mode, F key, click, and then just type in that value, but we want a positive value, not a negative one. So that got me really nice precision. Let's turn subdivision back on so we can see this. And let's press the tab key to leave edit mode. So that's really nicely controlled. And I think we could tighten it up just even slightly better. But we also want to talk about the fact that there are two ngons right in the middle of this subdivision. So let's come in here. I want to take these and I want to tighten these up because those are the boundary where the subdivided polygons on the corner here are progressing to, and I'd like to tighten that up. So let's select these and these, holding the Shift key, press Shift and E, and begin mousing, and you'll begin to see the creasing system moving those over like that. And that will get us even tighter on these corners. So let's talk about this. Every now and then it's appropriate to leave ngons in a subdivision. The Catmull-Clark mechanism can handle that. This is actually a better configuration than trying to put a triangle here and terminate those loops. This will become visible, well, one, if we just leave and look at it, it looks fine, right? But if we come over here into wireframe view and we turn off optimal display, it's actually produced loops for us. And that's kind of the best case scenario. We have just a lot of good loops, and the geometry is shallow enough that we don't see any problems. So you know what? I am totally fine leaving a couple of ngons here and here. Let's come in now, and we need to put a lip around the bottom, like a sort of border, so it's not just this hard edge. Come into edge mode. Let's go ahead and turn off subdivision and double click. Press the F key to fill that with the polygon. It's a big, gnarly ngon like that. That's okay. Press the I key and then inset just a little ways about like something about like that and click, and then immediately press the X key to remove that big ngon. So we just have the resulting boundary. Now we also need to put a boundary around the perimeter, otherwise it will subdivide in a very subtle curvature down into this area. So let's look at this in the front view. So we've got variability in the height of all of these polygons. And when we put a loop cut in the middle, it's going to simply divide the polygons in half, or as you slide them, it's not going to produce an even thickness for this loop going all the way around. We want an even thickness. So let's do this. Let's kind of focus on this area where it'll be really obvious. Command or Control R, click, hold, and drag. And as it gets closer up here, if you press the E key, it toggles the mode where it tries to maintain even thickness for the resulting polygons. If you want to flip it, press the F key, and now you see how resulting polygons are essentially the same width up there, but I want it to be the other way. So I'm pressing the F key again, and I'm going to get close right down about like that. Okay, so that's just a super cool handy feature. Now down here at the bottom, there's some sort of funky geometry. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm actually just going to come over here in face mode, Option Z, and I'm just going to remove all of this because we don't need those. So I'm just going to remove all of those all together. Let's turn subdivision back on so we can see that. This loop going all the way around is thick. These are the subdivided polygons. So if we take a look at this in the front and we go out of on cage mode, it selects the cage geometry. The subdivided geometry is pulling all the way up here, which means it's potentially pulling shading information, and it's certainly pulling slightly curving geometry all the way up. We don't want that to happen. We want to concentrate it down below. So double click and then press Shift E and begin pulling, and you'll see that snap right down there, and we get concentration of those subdivided polygons just where we want them. Okay, so there we go, and that looks good. So we're now pretty much ready, and this is all going to be hidden inside, so I'm not worrying about anything right there. So now we want to come in and put that design feature in the top, that cutout. Press the / key to come back into regular edit mode with all the objects. And let's take just both of these and again go back into edit mode just for these. So we're just working with these. So let's come into wireframe and Option Z for X-ray. Now this is going to differ than how I did it the first time. In this particular case, we're going to go down one resolution lower. Let's actually rename this. So we'll call this stapler top, and I'm going to have us duplicate this. So Shift and D, escape, and we'll hide the original just in case we mess up. We have the original to work with. But in this case, we're going to go down to just a subdivision level of 1, and this will be what we reconfigure. Let's go ahead and look at this in the left view. And actually, we need to actually properly apply the subdivision modifier so that we gain access to that level as the new cage geometry. Marquee around the one side on the left here, press X and delete those faces. Come back into the front view and let's begin configuring, starting from this bottom area. We have some obvious geometry that we can repurpose. GG, I'm just going to sort of flatten that down, one key, GG, and then we can get these as repurposed loops. This one, GG, I'm going to pull that there. And then here, 2 key, we're going to dissolve that edge. So what we need to do now is create a loop coming up here. So K key for knife, click, and we're just manually going to put these in right there. And it looks like we run right into a vertex that we can repurpose here and return. Okay, edge mode, let's go ahead and dissolve these. And we're not going to have to do too much work, but basically what I want is to produce a loop of polygons that basically are parallel to this new cut feature. So let's come over into vertex mode. This is what my eye's kind of looking at. I've got some polygons here, a loop. I've got kind of a loop of polygons here. And if I could tie those together. So the obvious thing to do is to come here and here and press the J key. And you can see we've got a quad right there. If we come in, let's go ahead and take these and dissolve those edges. And then take this vertex and this vertex, Q key, let's do that at last function. We end up with a situation where when we look at this, we've got a triangle, a quad, and a triangle. Subdivision surfaces can handle triangles and ngons, but if we can repurpose these to help with the flow of topology, that would actually be ideal. Press the K key, come to here, come right about to that location, click and return. So what we have now is not a triangle, but a quad. It looks like a triangle, but it's a quad. So let's come over into vertex mode here, GG, pull that down. So I'm forming this loop, and then 2 key, we can dissolve this, and we have a quad. So as I double click this, it finds that now we have a reconfigured loop in this location. So I want to take a look at this over here. We have one little triangle right there that I don't want to be there. So let's go ahead and dissolve those edges, Command R, and we'll put a loop right there. Let's look in the front view. We have such subtle curvature in here that I can move that up ever like a pixel, right? Then we come in and we take this, press the J key, and then GG to slide, we blend those together. GG, we blend those together, and that works. That'll work really well. So this is one of the things, again, you're always trying to look for with subdivision surfaces are loops, to produce loops. It's just one of the guiding principles. Now let's come here. We have this one that isn't anchored. Command Control R, click here, return, and then 1 key for vertex mode, J key to connect those, and then with just this one, GG to slide, and we will blend these loops together. GG, and there we have those. So what we need to do now is produce, there's a little boundary between the two pieces of geometry. So here again, we're going to use this really cool feature. If we press Command R to produce this loop, Control R on the PC, and it's just evenly dividing them between the two, but we want to put them into that even distribution mode. So tap the E key, and you may have to press F depending on how it chooses, but we want to get just about like that and click. So it's produced this even thickness between these polygons, which is really nice. So now we need to produce symmetry on this because the next set of operations really need to have symmetry to work correctly. So we'll just come back over here to generate and then mirror along Y. Tab key leaves edit mode, and then we actually need to apply that. Come back into edit mode, and then in face mode, select that. Let's come back into front, and then make sure the mouse is down here. It tends to work better down here for some reason. I key goes into an inset about like that, and then come over to the extrude along normals. Make sure that you are in active tools so you can click, hold, and drag, pull that down about like that, and then Command Control R on the PC to add one boundary in the middle there. Now we can come back in and turn on subdivision for our object, and let's do a level of 2. We can see the subdivided boundaries. So our thin polygon here, these are being subdivided and being pulled all the way up there. And I really want to get it concentrated. So we need to do a loop select around, but we're going to have a problem. The loop select is going to cut out at this corner intersection. So an easy way to do this, to get that, is to come back in, double click here, hold the shift key, double click, and then do an expand selection. Okay, then come up to select loops, select boundary loop, and then all we do, N key, is come over to mean crease on edge data and set that value to 1, and it concentrates those right in here, which we can see when we turn off optimal display. There we go. So now, tab key leaves edit mode, go into shaded, and there we go. Go back into the main scene. We can go ahead and hide this now. We don't need that anymore. And let's turn back on the metal parts. And there we go. We are done. So the secondary method, I just approached some of the operations, slightly different methodologies, using the tools in a little bit of a different way, but it just goes to show you that you can approach a modeling from sort of different angles and different methods.